This worker in Tehran says it takes him 2 days of work to get enough money to feed his family. Other posts on social media show people rummaging through rubbish to find something to eat. Iran's economy is in shambles, and many believe the nexus between the religious and military elite is to blame. International sanctions have limited the country's ability to earn money from oil and gas exports. Last year, the country brought in $69 billion from exports, down from $77 billion in 2006, before the sanctions were implemented. But economists say corruption is just as big a culprit.
I never believed that the sanctions were the root cause of the problems of the Iranian economy. The sanctions just highlighted and even intensified Iran's economic problems, but they no way caused those problems. We need more investment, more efficiency. We need to fight widespread corruption in the Iranian economy.
President Hasan Rouhani has long opposed the opaque structure and economic involvement of the Revolutionary Guard. His government recently leaked that more than $500 million of its revenues go to the military and religious establishment each year. And that's caused even more anger among people who are struggling to survive. Khatamul Anbiya and other firms owned by members of the Revolutionary Guard, also known as the IRGC, control refineries, pipelines and infrastructure. Since many are now sanctioned, these companies cannot conduct business outside the country. Rouhani wants them to give up control of these businesses.
Not only the social security organisation, but all government sectors, including banks, have to divest their business holdings, and this is the only way to rescue the country's economy. Government officials, non-government institutions, the armed forces and others. Everyone has to divest their commercial businesses.
The president has little control over the military establishment, and his orders are unlikely to get results. For decades, the country's political, religious, and military elite have colluded at the expense of ordinary people. And now that the economic pie is shrinking, it seems the gaps between them are also widening. Mobin Nasir, TRT World.
Well, Mobin joins me on set, but first let's turn to our editor-at-large, Craig Copetas, who is in Paris. Now, Craig, how difficult is it to separate the Revolutionary Guard from the official Iranian economy?
Well, Soraya, I'm going to turn the tables on you, because you're a reporter. You speak Farsi. The last time I covered anything in Persia was when Xerxes tried to cross into Thermopylae. And what I'm being told by intelligence and defense analysts is the following, that there's absolutely no difference between the Revolutionary Guard and the military that runs Iran. And that what we're hearing from President Rouhani is essentially a con job. Yeah, okay, we're going to divest, we're going to give it back to the people, but the analysts here are saying, well, no, we don't believe that, because the bad guys, as in their eyes, are still running the country. That is the only people here in the West who I've come across who kind of balk at that is Total, which is the only Western energy company that has any significant investments in Iran right now to help develop some natural gas fields.
Okay, well, let's turn to Mobin. Yes, please.
I would disagree, of course, very respectfully. Of course, the IRGC is extremely entrenched in the government and in the army, but they are not the entire government. Neither are they the entire economy. Look, we have seen this in other theological states where theological institutions are set up. Often they make up a mind of their own, especially when they're allowed such unbridled control in the economy. That is not something that the current government has done. It is something that, in fact, President Rouhani has in the past tried to oppose. He was not successful, and hence began the economic climb, if you will, of the Revolutionary Guard. If you go back a few decades, they were not in all businesses. They were allowed entry into a few businesses, given the argument that this was good for national security, as has happened to the eastern border of this country, in Pakistan also. They have subsequently gone into a lot of other businesses. If there were not odds, look, at times both the Revolutionary Guard and the government have co-opted, but there are times like now when they are co-opting with the opposition. Case in point, where did these protests start? In the town of Mashhad, where whose leader Ibrahim Raisi was not only the main opponent to the presidential bid for Mr. Rouhani, but was also one of the people named and shamed essentially for taking $150 million out of the state coffer for his own charity.
Well, absolutely. And just to touch on that, we know that from reports, the Supreme Leader, even last year, seems to have approved this idea of scaling back the Revolutionary Guard's interests. There have been arrests and what seems like a low-level drive to divest and seize assets, but obviously not so publicly that they would throw everybody off balance. I mean, would you agree that this is part of a reformist kind of model?
It'll take a lot more than what is being done at the moment, and that I think to that extent we agree, Craig and I. The president saying that they need to step out has very little meaning. Even if the government were to scale down its funding, keep in mind that the companies that are affiliated with the Revolutionary Guard, their revenues in any given year exceeds about $30 billion. That's 5 times what they get from the government. So clearly, even if government funding is scaled back, they will continue to make a lot of money and hence exercise a lot of control. And how the government plans to wrestle these companies out of their control and who in the private sector will get it, will that not open up on more doors of nepotism? That's going to be a very sticky situation.
Absolutely. Craig, let's go to you if we can, if you want to jump in there. We talk about nepotism.
Well, yeah.
I think you've got something to say on that.
Well, you know, yes, yeah. Look, Mobin and I, we'll tell the audience how we make sausage. Mobin and I had this robust discussion prior to going on earlier today. And I actually presented that question to some of the Western analysts and intelligence people I spoke with originally. And their response to me is, we don't believe you. We don't believe Iran. We don't believe there is going to ever be a separation of church and state in Iran until the mullatory goes away. That the Revolutionary Guard and the theocracy that controls the country are still going to be profiting from this. And what you hear from the business community so far, with rare exception, is the Western business community is still very reluctant to step in to do business there. Certainly the Americans, certainly a lot of Europeans. Yes, there are certain deals, but they're not at the velocity required to really transform the Iranian economy to the point that makes those characters Mobin talked about in his excellent piece, you know, an anathema to Iranian culture. And that's really the issue. The West, the powers that be in the West, primarily and predominantly don't believe what they're hearing coming out of Tehran, whether we like it or not. That's what they're saying.
Okay, well, you talk about the deals that are being done, they're not big enough. We know that the French, the Italians, Austrians, Chinese, South Koreans, they're doing billions of dollars worth of trade. The US, of course, we know that they've got problems there with Treasury and getting licenses to do business in Iran. Obviously, a government in Washington right now which is effectively scaring a lot of investors away. But does it really even matter if the United States is involved in Iranian business?
As long as we have a dilapidated Iranian economy, as long as the reports that we just showed continue, you're going to have problems there. And the real issue, what's fearing a lot of Western businessmen, and it goes back to our old friend on Money Talks, the weaponization of the U.S. dollar. These deals will require dollars. They will require Western banks. And so long as the United States is willing to go after anyone who's dealing in U.S. dollars in a manner that the U.S. doesn't like, regardless of their citizenship or location, there's going to be a problem. Soraya, it's not a matter that these deals are happening, which are terrific. It's a matter of the velocity of the investment. And that velocity of investment in Iran does not meet the requirements of the Iranian people right now. And it doesn't look like they're going to meet their requirements for quite some time to come.
I would agree 100% with Craig. Look, there's a pattern that most developing economies follow. In order for foreign investors to really commit long-term and significant funding, they want to see the likes of the IMF, the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank putting their money ahead of private business. And as long as the United States stays opposed to doing business with Iran, sure, we can see a $10 billion loan from China, we can see another $10 billion credit facility from South Korea, as long as you're buying South Korean products, mind you. But you will not see the kind of sustained economic injections that the country at this point needs to grow its non-oil business. Keep in mind, the oil sector has grown in the past few years, in recent years. And I know you want to talk about the economic performance of the country. So let's talk about it. There really seems to be two parts of it. There's the oil and gas sector, and that's no doubt done really well. But then there's the rest of the economy. And in the case of Iran, oil and gas is only about 11 or 12% of the economy. So what does everybody else do?
Well, that's a very good point that you make. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. Thank you, Craig and Mobin.